Part 2, Chapter 2, 10:15 a.m. Jeremy Thorpe stood almost as if at attention before a military court in the centre of the kitchen. "Do you understand what I've said?" Salisbury said. "Yeah. You know what to do?" "Yeah, I know." "Any questions?" "Just one." "What is it?" "What do I do if they don't show up?" "They'll show up," Salisbury said. "But what if they don't?" "You have a watch, don't you?" The boy held up one thin wrist. "You wait 25 minutes for them. If they don't show up in that time, come straight back here. Is that understood?" "Yeah, 20 minutes. Get moving." The boy started towards the door. "Don't leave that way. They'll see you. Go out the front." Jeremy went down the narrow hall to the door. Salisbury followed. Watched until the boy was out of sight behind the neighbouring house, closed the door, locked it, and went back to the kitchen. Not bad, he thought. "You're holding up well, Ogden." H. Leonard himself couldn't have coped any faster than you'd done. "Clever as hell." "You are certainly clever. With your mind and the advantage of the power, the key loco phrase, you'll weather this crisis. If Miriam could see you now—" What could old Miriam say now? "You aren't anything like Miriam said you were. You're a tough customer." Jesus, what a tough customer. "You made sound decisions under pressure, and you stick with them. Smart, damn smart. But oh my God, what a razor edge you're walking." Standing next to the rear window, he pushed the curtain aside a fraction of an inch until he could see the garage. Annandale slid the squirrel cage into the cargo bed of the station wagon, closed the tailgate, and put up the electric window. Jenny Edison got in the car. Annandale and Emma talked for perhaps a minute. Then he got behind the wheel and reversed out of the driveway. When Emma waved goodbye to them and started back towards the house, Salisbury let the curtain fall into place. She came into the kitchen, saw him, and he was startled. She looked as if she was ready to scream. "What are you doing here?" "Who are you?" "I am the key. I am the lock." "Relax." She did. "Sit down," she said. He stood in front of her, loomed over her. "What were you and Annandale talking about out there?" He kept apologizing for his daughter's behavior. Salisbury laughed. Because her memories of this morning's events had been selectively edited, she didn't see the humour in the situation. Why would Rye accuse Bob of murder? What a terrible thing! Does she think she's being funny? What a gruesome joke! The entrance foyer of St. Margaret Mary's Roman Catholic Church was quite enlightened, nearly lightness. The entire interior was done in dark pine, pegged pine floors, dark pine walls, open beam ceilings, an intricately carved 12-foot high crucifix, as befitted the major house of worship in a lumber mill town. A 5-watt bulb burned above the holy water font, 12 feet away. At the far end of the auditorium, votive candles flickered in ruby-colored glass cups, and soft lights shone at the base of the altar. However, little of this ghostly illumination filtered through the open archway into the foyer. Cloaked in these shadows and in the holy silence, Jeremy Thorpe leaned against one of the two heavy brass-fitted front doors of the church. He opened it only 1 or 2 inches and held it in place with his hip. Beyond lay a set of brick steps, the sidewalk, a pair of birch trees, and then the western end of Main Street. The Union Theatre was directly across the street. He had an adequate view of it in spite of the birches. Jeremy looked at his watch in the blade of light that sliced through the narrow crack between the doors. 10:20. As they approached a traffic light at the town square, Paul switched on the right-hand turn signal. Jenny said, "The stall's to the left, I know." "Where are we going?" "To the basketball court behind the theatre, to pick up Emma." "No, I'm sure she's telling the truth." "What then? Why then?" "I want to ask Mark exactly what did happen this morning," he said, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel as he waited, impatient for the light to change. "Emma told us what happened." "Nothing," he said. Emma's eyes were red and puffy, as if she'd been crying. Maybe she and Bob had an argument while Mark was there. Raya might have come to the door at the height of the shouting. She might have misunderstood what had happened, and she panicked and ran. Emma would have told us. She might have been too embarrassed. As the traffic light turned green, Jenny said, "Panic? That sure doesn't sound like Raya." "I know, but it is more in character for her to fabricate extravagant lies." She nodded. "You're right. As unlikely as it is, it's more likely that she was confused and that she panicked." We'll ask Mark. According to Jeremy Thorpe's wristwatch, it was 10:22 when Paul Annandale drove his station wagon up Main Street and into the alleyway beside the theatre. As soon as the car was out of sight, the boy left the church. He went down the front steps, stood at the curb, and waited for the station wagon to reappear. During the last hour, the sky had come closer to the earth. From horizon to horizon, a solid mass of lowering grey-black clouds rolled eastward, driven by a strong high-altitude wind. Some of the wind had begun to sweep the streets of Black River, just enough of it to turn the leaves on the trees, a sign, according to folklore, of oncoming rain. No rain, please, Jeremy thought. We don't want any damn rain, at least not before tonight. This summer, a dozen kids had organised a series of bicycle races to be held every Friday. Last week, he had placed second in the main event, the crosstown dash. But I'll be first this week, he thought. I've been in training, heavy training, not wasting any time like those other kids. I'm sure to be the first this week if it doesn't rain. He glanced at his watch again, 10:26. A few seconds later, when he saw the station wagon coming back down the alley, Jeremy started walking east along Main Street at a brisk pace. As the car nosed out of the alley, just as Paul was about to turn right onto Main Street, Jenny said, "There's Jeremy." Paul tapped the brakes. "Where?" "Across the street. Mark's not with him." He blew the horn, pulled down his window, and motioned for the boy to come to him. After he had looked both ways, Jeremy crossed the street. "Hi, Mr. Annandale." "Hi, Jenny." Paul said, "Your mother told me you and Mark are playing basketball behind the theatre." "We started to, but it wasn't much fun, so we went to Gordon's Woods." "Where's that?" They were in the final block of Main Street, but the road continued to the west. It rose with the land, rounded a bluff, and went on until it reached the mill, and after that the logging camp. Jeremy pointed to the forest atop the bluff. "That's Gordon's Wood." "Why would you want to go up there?" Paul asked. "We've got a tree house in Gordon's Woods." The boy read Paul's expression accurately as he quickly said, "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Annandale. It's not a rickety old place. It's completely safe. Some of our fathers built it for all the kids in town." "He's right," Jeremy said. "It's safe. Sam was one of the fathers who built it." She smiled, even though his daughter is a bit too old for tree houses. Jeremy grinned. He wore braces. Those and the freckles that peppered his face disarmed Paul. The boy clearly didn't have the guile, the dark personality, or the experience to take part in a murder conspiracy. Paul felt somewhat relieved when he hadn't found Jeremy and Mark at the basketball court. That icy hand had settled once more. It briefly on the back of his neck, he said, "Is Mark up at the tree house now?" "Yeah, why aren't you there?" "Me and Mark and a couple of other kids want to play Monopoly, so I'm going to home to get my set." Jeremy, how could he possibly find out what he wanted to know? Did anything happen in your kitchen this morning? The boy blinked, a bit perplexed by the question. "We had breakfast." Feeling more foolish than ever, Paul said, "Well, you better get your Monopoly set. The other kids are waiting." Jeremy said goodbye to Jenny and Paul and to Buster. He turned, looked both ways and crossed the street. Paul watched him until he turned the corner at the square. "Now what?" Jenny asked. Raya probably ran to Sam for sympathy and protection. He sighed. She had time to calm down. Maybe she realizes that she panicked. We'll see what her story is now. If she didn't run to Sam, then there's no use looking for her all over town. If she wants to hide from us, she can with little trouble. Sooner or later, she'll come to the store. Sitting at the kitchen table across from his mother, Jeremy recounted the conversation he'd had with Paul Annandale a few minutes ago. When the boy finished, Salisbury said, "And he believed it." Jeremy frowned. "Believed what?" "He believed that Mark was at the treehouse." "Well, sure, isn't he?" Okay, Salisbury thought. "This isn't the end of the crisis. You've brought some time to think. An hour or two, maybe 3 hours. Eventually Annandale will go looking for his son. 2 or 3 hours. You've no time to waste. Be decisive. You've been wonderfully decisive so far. What you've got to do is be decisive and get this straightened out before you have to tell Dawson about it." Earlier, within 20 minutes of the boy's death, he had edited the Thorpe family's memories. He erased all memories of the killing from their minds. That editing took no longer than 2 or 3 minutes, but it was only the first stage of the plan to conceal his involvement in the murder. If the situation were any less desperate, if a capital offence hadn't been committed, if the entire Keylock program didn't hang in the balance, he could have left the Thorpes with blank spots in their memories, and he could have felt perfectly safe in spite of that. but the circumstances were such that he knew he should not merely wipe out the truth, but that he should also replace it with a detailed set of false memories, recollections of routine events which might have happened that morning, but which in reality did not. He decided to begin with the woman. To the boy he said, "Go into the room and sit on the couch. Don't move from there until I call for you. Understood?" "Yeah." Jeremy left the room. Salisbury thought for a minute about how to proceed. Emma watched him, waited. Finally he said, "Emma, what time is it?" She looked at the clock later. 20 minutes of 11. "No," he said softly, "that's wrong. It's 20 minutes of 9. 20 minutes of 9 this morning." "It is?" "Look at the clock, Emma." 20 of 9, she said. "Where are you, Emma?" "In my kitchen. Who else is here?" "Just you." "No," he sat in Jeremy's chair. "You can't see me. You can't see me at all. Can you, Emma?" "No, I can't see you. You can hear me. But you know what? Whenever our little conversation is over, you won't remember we've had it. Every event that I describe to you in the next couple of minutes will become a part of your memories. You won't remember that you were told these things. You will think that you actually experienced them. Is that clear, Emma?" Yes, her eyes glazed, her facial muscles went slack. "All right, what time is it?" 20 minutes of 9. "Where are you?" "In my kitchen." "Who else is there?" "No one." "Bob and Jeremy are gone." "Bob and Jeremy are here," she said. "Bob's in that chair." She smiled at Bob. "Jeremy's sitting there. 3 of you are eating breakfast." "Yes, breakfast. Fried eggs, toast, orange juice." "Pick up that glass, Emma." She lifted the glass, empty in front of her. "Drink, Emma." She stared doubtfully at the tumbler. "It's filled to the top with cold, sweet orange juice. Do you see it?" "Yes." "Does it look good?" "Yes." "Drink some of it, Emma." She drank from the empty glass. He laughed aloud. The power! It was going to work. He could make her remember whatever he wished. "How does it taste?" He licked her lips. "Delicious." "Lovely animal," he thought, suddenly giddy. "Lovely, lovely little animals." Chapter 3. Noon. In Buddy's nightmare, 2 men were filling the town's reservoir with cats. In the deeper shadows of the night, just before sunrise, they were standing at the edge of the pool, opening cages and pitching the animals into the water. The felines squalled about this assault on their dignity and comfort. Soon the reservoir was teeming with cats, alley cats, Siamese cats, Angora cats, Persian cats, black cats, and grey cats, and white cats, and yellow cats, striped cats, spotted cats, old cats, and kittens. Below the reservoir, in Black River, Buddy innocently turned on the cold water tap in his kitchen, and cats, dozen upon dozens of fiercely angry cats, began to spill into the sink. Full-sized cats that had somehow miraculously passed through the plumbing, through narrow gouge pipes, and rat traps and elbow joints, and filter screens, screeching, wailing, hissing, biting, scratching. Cats fell over one another and clawed the porcelain and scrambled inexorably out of the sink as new streams of cats poured in behind them. Cats on the counter, cats on the bread box, cats in the dish rack. They leapt to the floor and clambered atop the cupboards. One of them jumped on Buddy's back. As he turned to run, he tore it loose and threw it against the wall. The other cats were outraged by this cruelty. They swarmed after Buddy, all of them spitting and snarling. He reached the bedroom and living room inches ahead of them, slammed and locked the door. They threw themselves against the far side of the barrier and yammered incessantly. But they weren't strong enough to force their way through it. Relieved that he had escaped them, Buddy turned and saw 10-yard square cages full of cats, scores of green eyes studying him intensely, and behind the cages 2 men wearing shoulder holsters, holding pistols, and dressed in black rubber scuba suits. He woke up, sat up, and screamed. He flailed at the mattress, wrestled with the sheets, and pounded his fist into the pillows for a few seconds until gradually he realized that none of these things were a cat dream. He mumbled, because Buddy slept in the mornings and early afternoons. The drapes were heavy and there were virtually no light in the room. He quickly switched on the bedside lamp. No cats, no men in scuba suits. Although he knew that he had been dreaming, although he'd had this same dream on each of the last 3 days, Buddy got out of bed, stepped into a pair of slippers that were as large as most men's boots, and lumbered into the kitchen to check the water faucets. There were no cats streaming out of them, and that was a good thing to know. However, he was badly shaken. He was no less affected by the dream for having endured it on 2 other occasions all week. His sleep had been disturbed by dreams of another sort or another, and he never was able to fall back to sleep once brought awake by a vivid nightmare. The wall clock showed 12:13. He came home from the mill at 8:30 and went to bed at 9:30, 5 days a week, as if he were a clockwork mechanism, which meant that he had gotten barely 3 hours of sleep. He went to the kitchen table, sat down, and opened the travel magazine that he had bought at the general store last Monday. He studied the photographs of divers in scuba suits. Why, he thought, divers, seamen, guns at the reservoir? Why so late at night, dark river divers? Why? Figure it. Come on, figure it. Can. Divers in woods night, so crazy, can't figure it. He decided to shower, get dressed, and walked across the street to Edison's general store. It was the time he asked Sam to figure it out for him. At 12:05, Ryan watched a man in thick glasses, grey trousers, and a dark blue shirt enter Pauline Vickers' rooming house. He was the man who had ordered Bob Thorpe to kill Mark. At 12:10, she went to St. Margaret's Mary and hid in one of the confessionals at the right rear corner of the nave. Last week, she had heard Emma mention the Friday lunch and card club that met all afternoon in the church basement. Through a chink in the crimson velveteen confessional curtain, she could look across the back of the nave to the steps that led down to the recreation room. Women in bright summer dresses and pantsuits, many of them carrying umbrellas, arrived singingly and in pairs for the next 15 minutes, and Emma Thorpe came through the foyer arch promptly at 12:30. Ryan recognized her even in the dim light, and as soon as Emma disappeared down the stairs, Ryan left the confessional. For a moment she was transfixed by the sight of the crucifix at the far end of the chamber. The wooden Christ seemed to be staring over all the pews, directed at her. You could have saved my mother, she thought. You could have saved Mark. Why did you put killers on earth? Of course the crucifix had no answer. God helps those who help themselves, she thought. Okay, I'm going to help myself. I'm going to make them pay for what they did to Mark. I'm going to get proof of it. You wait and see. If I don't, you wait and see. She began trembling again, and she felt tears at the corner of her eyes. She took a minute to calm herself, then walked out of the nave. In the foyer, she discovered that one of the main doors was open, and that the lowest of its 4 hinges had been removed. A toolbox stood on the foyer floor, and a variety of tools were spread out across it. The workman apparently had gone to get some piece of material that he had forgotten on his first trip. She turned and looked through the archway at the 12-foot-high crucifix. The wooden eyes still seemed to be staring at her, a terrible, sad expression in them. Quickly worried that the workman might return at any moment, she bent down, peered into the toolbox, and plucked a heavy wrench from it. She slipped the wrench in the pocket of her windbreaker and left the church. At 12:35, she strolled past the municipal building, which was at the northeast corner of the square. The police chief's office was towards the rear of the first floor, and it had 2 large windows. The Venetian blinds were raised. As she passed, she saw Bob Thorpe sitting at his desk facing the windows. He was eating a sandwich and reading a magazine. At 12:40, she stood in front of Altman's Cafe and watched as a dozen kids cycled north on Union Road towards the Macadam Valley, where some of the Friday races were held. Jeremy Thorpe was one of the cyclists. At 12:45, at the southern end of Union Road, Raya crossed the street, walked under the grapevine arbor, and went around to the back of the Thorpe place. The lawn ended in brush and trees. No parallel streets and no buildings in that direction. There was no house to her left, just the lawn and the garage and the river. To her right, the nearest dwelling was set closer to Union Road than was the Thorpe's house. Therefore, she was not in anyone's line of sight. A polished copper knocker gleamed in the centre of the door. To one side of that, near the knob, were 3 decorative windows, each 6 inches wide and 9 inches long. She knocked loudly. No one answered. When she tried the door, she found that it was locked. She had expected as much. She took the stolen wrench from her windbreaker, gripped it tightly in one hand, and used it to smash the middle pane in the vertical row on 3. The blow made considerably more noise than she had anticipated, although not sufficient noise to discourage her. When she had broken every shard of glass out of the frame, she pocketed the wrench, reached through the window, and felt for the latch. She began to despair of ever locating the mechanism, and then her fingers touched cool metal. She fumbled with the lock for almost a minute, finally released it, withdrew her arm from the window, and shoved open the door. Standing on the stoop, staring wearily into the shadow-hung kitchen, she thought, what if one of them comes back home and finds me in there? Go ahead, she urged herself. You better go inside before you lose your courage. I'm scared. They killed Mark. You ran away this morning. Are you going to run away again? Are you going to run away from everything that scares you, from now until the day you die? She walked into the kitchen. Glass crunched underfoot. When she reached the electric range where the murder had taken place, she stood quite still, poised to flee, and listened closely for movement. The refrigerator and the upright freezer rumbled softly. Steadily, the clock radio hummed. A loose window rattled as a gust of wind rushed through the side of the house. In the living room, a grandfather clock running a few minutes late solemnly chimed the three quarters of the hour. The note reverberated long after the pipe had been struck. The house was filled with noises, but none of them had a human source. She was alone, having broken the law, having violated the sanctity of another person's home. With the first and most dangerous step already taken, she couldn't decide what to do next. Well, search the house, of course. Search it from top to bottom, look for the body. But where to begin? At last, when she realized that her indecision was an outgrowth of the fear which was determined to overcome, when she realized that she was desperately afraid of finding Mark's corpse, even though she had come here to do precisely that, she began to search in the kitchen. There were only a few places in that room where the body of a 9-year-old boy might possibly be concealed. She looked in the pantry, in the refrigerator, and then in the freezer, but she uncovered nothing out of the ordinary. When she opened the cabinet beneath the sink, however, she saw a bucket full of bloody rags, not rags really, dish towels. They used the towels to clean up, but had thrown them in the bucket and then apparently forgot to destroy the evidence. She picked up one of the cloths. It was wet, cold, and heavy with blood. She dropped it and gazed at the stained hands. Oh, Mark, she said sadly, a bit breathlessly. A pain rose from deep inside her, filled her chest. Little Mark, you never ever hurt anyone, not anyone, but what they did to you was an awful thing. They did to you. Why? She stood up. Her knees felt weak. Find the body, she thought. No, she told herself. You come here to find the body. I've changed my mind. Find the body. No, that's just too much. Not much too much. Finding him, Mark. With his skull cracked open and his eyes rolled back into his head and dried blood all over his face. Too much. Even strong girls can't deal with everything in life. Even strong girls have their limits, don't they? This is mine, my limit. I can't go looking all through the house. Just can't. Beginning to cry, beginning to shake, she picked up the bucket and left the house. At 12:45, Southborough carried his briefcase down from his room and went to the parlour. Pauline Vickers was sitting in the largest of the 3 armchairs. She was a heavy-set woman in her early 60s, fluffy grey hair, ruddy complexion, double-chin merry eyes, and a nearly constant smile. She had the archetypal grandmother's face, the model for grandmother's face in storybooks and movies. Her bare feet were propped up on a hassock. She was eating candies and watching a television soap opera. From the doorway, he said, Mrs. Vickers. She glanced up, chewing her caramel. She had some trouble swallowing. Then, good afternoon, Mr. Dayton. If you've a complaint about you or anything, do you think perhaps it could wait just a minute, a few minutes? No, not longer than that, mind you, just until the show ends. It's one of my favourite shows, and I'm the key, he said impatiently. Oh, she said, disappointed that she wasn't going to be able to finish watching the program. I'm the lock. Get up, Mrs. Vickers. She struggled out of the chair. Fat old cow, he thought. What do you need? She asked pleasantly. I'll need this room for a while, he said, walking to the desk, which held a private telephone. Don't disturb me. Am I to leave? Yes, now. She looked wistfully at the round maple table beside her armchair. May I take my box of candy? Yes, just get the hell out of here, please. She snatched up the candy. I'm as good as gone. As good as gone, Mr. Dayton. You take your time here. I won't let anyone disturb you. Mrs. Vickers, yes. Go to the kitchen. All right. Eat your chocolates if you want. I will. Listen to your radio and wait in the kitchen till I come to you. Yes, sir. Is that completely clear? Clear? Certainly, certainly. I'll do just what you say. See, if I don't, I'll go straight out to the kitchen, eat my chocolates, and listen. And close the door as you leave, he said sharply. Leave now, Mrs. Vickers. She shut the parlour door behind her. At the desk, Salisbury opened his briefcase. He took from it a set of screwdrivers and one of the infinity transmitters, a small black box with several wires trailing from it that Dawson had purchased in Brussels. Smythe thought clever of me to bring the IF. Didn't know why I was packing it at the time. A hunch, just a hunch. And it's paid off now. Clever. I'm on top of the situation, right up there, on top, in control, full control. Having carefully considered his options, algebraic, even when he was so recently returned from the edge of panic, he had decided that it was time to hear what Paul Annandale was saying to the Edisons. There was a dozen miniature glass swans lined up across the top of the desk, each slightly different in size and shape and colour from the one that preceded it. He brushed these figurines to the floor. They bounced on the carpet and clinked against one another. His mother had collected hand-blown figurines, although not swans. She favoured glass dogs. By the hundreds, he crushed one of the swans under his heel and imagined that it was a glass dog. Curiously satisfied by his gesture, he connected the infinity transmitter to the telephone and dialed the number of the general store. Across the street, no telephone rang at Edison's place. Nevertheless, every receiver in the store, as well as families from living quarters above the store, opened to Salisbury's ears. What he heard in the first couple of minutes broke down the paper-thin walls of composure that he had managed to rebuild since the murder. Buddy Pellerini, in his own half-literate fashion, was telling Sam and Jenny and Paul about the two men who had come down for the reservoir on the morning of August 6th. Rosner and Holbrook had been seen. However, that was neither the only nor the worst piece of bad news. Before Buddy had reached the end of the story, before Edison and the others had finished questioning him, Annandale's daughter arrived with a bucket full of bloody rags. The damn bucket. In his haste to clean up the kitchen and hide the corpse, he had shoved the bucket under the sink and then had completely forgotten about it. The boy's body wasn't all that well hidden, but at least it wasn't in the room where the murder had occurred. The damn bloody rags. He left evidence at the scene of the crime, virtually out in plain sight, where any fool could have found it. He could no longer afford to spend hours formulating his response to the events of the morning. If he had to contain the crisis and save the project, he would have to think fast and move faster than he'd ever done before. He stepped on another glass swan and snapped it to pieces. Thanks for listening.